Hello. Okay, so full warning. I am on that 5-week vacation I have told you all about, and it was just, it just came alive for me. I've just been having conversations with friends. I went to San Francisco and I hung out with a lot of the women that were my best friends when I lived there 10 years ago. And since they've all had kids, and just so many discussions around motherhood and just being total badasses and just ambitious women that want to do a lot with their careers, but also are just so committed to being really present, wonderful mothers. And I don't think I've made an episode about this for Off the Record. I do think many years ago, I did make an episode on something around motherhood, which probably would be useful. I think I probably made that in my, first couple $100,000 or something, or maybe even 100,000, much earlier on in my business. And so I will link that in the show notes in case it's helpful for you guys. But I really wanted to, and maybe it would be interesting to even go back. I haven't listened to that. So go back and listen to that episode that I'll link. And then I wanted to break down here what I have followed are sort of the 3 phases I've been through as a mother on this journey. Also, I'm sitting outside, so I'm hoping the recording is good. I hear birds chirping and wind chimes and wind. So fair warning, this is sort of the cost of me not having a fancy microphone and just coming on for private audio notes. I just hope it all works for later. So as I was sitting with this, one of the things you all know I've really been just exploring this year is my path to sovereignty. And obviously, there's many facets of sovereignty, and I do think this actually becomes a whole body of work, but there has been my path to financial sovereignty and going from it being kind of a struggle to having millions and millions of dollars. There has been my journey of mental and emotional sovereignty, where I didn't own my own belief systems in my mind, which I'll talk quite a bit about today. There's relational sovereignty and how we relate to others. There's creative sovereignty and your ability to have a vision in your mind and pursue it. So I've just been sitting. It's so funny. I'm just, 2 weeks into this vacation, and I can feel not a big shift. There's just a whole body of work. It feels this next sort of phase as I am just so fully sovereign. And obviously there's always work. There's places I'm bound. I'm sure that I don't even see I'm bound right now. But when I look at where I was as a woman, and, in this episode we'll be covering motherhood, it's absolutely night and day from just 5 or 6 years ago till now, when I started really doing personal development work, when I had my spiritual awakening and really just sort of woke up to what I wanted my life to be, and that I was actually the conscious creator of it, right? And then coming into sovereignty around creating that. So for me, I would say that there were 3 phases. And the first, I would say, I don't know. What do we say? Okay, so there's 4 phases, I guess. One was me just asleep, right? I'm I'm asleep and I'm just dissatisfied. But I don't think we really need too much of me covering that. We all just sort of get it. And then I started to wake up. I started to just identify, for sure, there were a lot of things where I didn't feel like a conscious creator of my own time, my own mind, my own money. When I was an employee, I very much was I've got to do this job I hate, and it takes me away from my kids, and it's all the patriarchy's fault, and everything was always someone else's fault. And of course, then if it's someone else's fault, then I can't take responsibility for changing it, all of those things. But then I started to wake up, and I was wait a second, actually, if it is possible that I can create my own life, then I have to look at all of the places where I am incongruent. And I really started to see all of the places where I was surviving in a split identity. This is very much pre-sovereignty, right? And so there's many ways that this manifested, but I didn't have financial sovereignty yet. I had a lot of concerns around finances. I didn't have the ability to hire the support I wanted to have. And I think, if you guys have listened, but financial sovereignty was really one of the first that I started to master before I even started my business. I just got really good at really understanding how money worked and moving money and having my money go out and always come back with friends. like to invest and have just snowballs of money out there passively working for me. And so, but there was a period in motherhood where I was just like, I am a mom and I want to be home with my kids, but like I have to keep working. And so I had to sort of find a pathway out of that. And so financial sovereignty really was my first pathway into starting to be like a fully sovereign woman. The biggest work for me then was I didn't have any mental or emotional sovereignty. So mothering guilt pretty much ruled my calendar. It ruled my life. It ruled my mental space. It like caused rifts in my marriage. Like there were just so many things where, we're all conditioned with like, this is who you should be as a mom. This is who you should be as a mother. And it went against what my desires were. And then my not self theme as a manifestor, I was mad. I was angry, right? So I found myself, like mad at my husband I was like blaming him. Basically, I think I sort of washed his poor face in the patriarchy and was like, it's his fault. I can't like do certain things. It was like very wild. If you had like, it is wild when people hear stories about me before I really woke up and did my own work. But I would be mad at him. I would be like resentful of my kids, but also like loved them so much. Like it was, and I loved my husband too. Like it was so weird. The energy, there was all of this push pull energy, which is like, if you guys have been around for a minute, that's always a sign, right? There's some sort of conditioning, deprogramming, like not owning your mental, emotional sovereignty. If there's like a push pull between what you want and they're feeling friction, right? In your ability to have it. And so I started like needing to unwind all of that in phase 2, right? And so a lot of this in phase 1, this like surviving and split identity, pre-sovereignty, kind of victim consciousness. I was unconsciously resentful, right? I would be resentful. I was also like guilt, right? Like I would feel guilty for working. Like I remember I started my business when my third kid when I was pregnant with my third kid. And then when he was born, I wanted to have him in the house. So we had an au pair with us, and I would feel so guilty if I heard him in the home. So like I felt guilty when I was working. And then when I was off work and then I was with him, I would feel guilty for not working and I would be thinking about work. So I just had like absolutely no sovereignty over my own mental and emotional space. It was basically all run by unconscious programming that I hadn't pulled out, looked at, like expunged from my brain and body, right? And allowed me to really just be free in what I wanted to be as a mother. I also had a lack of boundaries. So I would like work during nap times. If I was off with him for the day, then I'd overcompensate with the kids. Like there was just so much stuff where I would say like I didn't feel great. Like I didn't feel like a good mom when I was working, and I didn't feel like a good business owner when I was being a mom. Like I just never felt good. And like I loved my family, but I used to just resent them for how much they needed me. And then I really had to look at like, where was I complicit in creating those dynamics? And then actually even further from that, where was I actively creating those dynamics because I had been trained to believe that's what I was supposed to do, right? And so this was really what brought me then into phase 2, which was like reclaiming my mind, right? And the sovereignty really started to begin. So this at first, like you guys have heard me talk a lot about money. We don't need to like really dive into it there, but like me starting to look at like, oh, I am actually the one who is the creator of what's in my bank account. And there's so many creative ways to make tons of money. There's so many creative ways to like invest, to be really like a conscious steward of my money and have that money go out and make tons more money and come back with friends and all of those things. And so that actually did alleviate. Like, I don't think it's all your thoughts, right? Like, it was very useful when I started to have financial sovereignty because it gave us options, right? Like I guess at this point, maybe I don't know if it's 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago at this point, but we hired a house manager, which I can talk a little bit more about in like phase 3. But at this point, my kids were like talking the other day. They're like, Mommy, we have so much help, but like we have a house manager. We have like, I don't know if we would call her like a personal assistant or a mother's helper. Like she comes in and helps with like bed sheets and cleaning up the kids' room and like little stuff like that. And then we have a cleaner, right? So we have like lots of domestic support, which really happened. It became possible both because of my financial sovereignty and the responsibility I took to create that for myself, but it also required me creating that mental and emotional sovereignty, right? Where I had to look at, I remember like the first time so our house manager cooks our dinners and she washes the dishes, right? So like everything's just clean, right? It's like the kitchen is sparkling clean and I just get to be with my husband and my kids, right? And the first night that this was happening, I remember going outside to play like What Time Is It, Mr. Fox with my kids and just feeling guilty. I remember like looking inside because you can see from our courtyard, like you can see inside the window when someone's like washing dishes or whatever. And I remember just like seeing her, like we just had a delicious dinner that she had prepared and then she was just like washing all of our dishes. And there was like this sense of like, I should be doing that versus like, wait, I took the time to like create a job description and like recruit and interview and like find the right person that like wanted this to be their job. And like not allowing myself to just really soak in the pleasure. So like it did take work, even after I'd created the financial sovereignty to have the support. It took doing that mental and emotional work of like, oh wait, it turns out it's just like a totally invented concept that women should be doing all of this alone, or that women should be were like somehow, you know, like it used to be that women were the caretakers and the man made the money, but then it was like women entered the workforce and we didn't ever like change, right? Any of the structures around what domestic duties looked like, right? So then it's like so many women are then essentially just doing both. And then you wonder why people are burned out and whatever, right? But like, I don't know. I just see, I was definitely this way in phase 1 too, where I was like just mad and I thought it was everybody else's fault. But then I really had to look at like, I'm fucking part of the problem. Like I am actually creating these norms by being complicit to them, by not having conversations, by not setting boundaries. And there were certain things that I remember, like there were so many examples of this, but like there were things with my husband where like I felt really resentful of like that he wasn't helping more in the house. And then there was like this night where I basically was just like so like exhausted. Like I wasn't even mad. It was more just like I was so sad and like run down and like I just was just expressing like it's so hard to do it all alone or something like that. And then like as we had that discussion, I was like, oh, I created this, that like I'm supposed to be doing all this. I'm not actively asking him for support. I'm not setting boundaries and saying, this is what I will do. And then like, this is like, you know, like what seems fair to you. This seems like it could work for you to do what feels right to you, right? Like really dividing up. We both created these children. Now let's like work on co-parenting together, like really co-parenting together. And so for me during this phase, it was a lot of like, there was like setting boundaries, like not just setting the boundaries of like, this is when I work, but like really then looking at within my own mind, where was I not in control of where my mind then went, right? So I had to look at if I was feeling guilty during the workday for not being with my kids, like I had to look at like, okay, is that sacred? Is that something that's really coming from like my deepest self that is like, no, I ache for more time with my children during this time? And if so, I have to look at that and I have to make changes in my business. Or if I look at it as like, no, actually my highest desire and pleasure right now is working in my business, but I was taught that women are supposed to be doing this and so I feel guilty. And if that's the case, I need to just look at that belief system and unwind it. And so phase 2 really was about not just beginning to really create financial sovereignty, but I think almost even more importantly, creating that mental and emotional sovereignty so that like when I was working, I was totally in my creative flow. I was in my joy, my pleasure, like all of the things. And then when I was off, I was present with my kids. I was connected. We were doing fun things, right? And really just like redefining what does being a good mother look like for me. And if that's different than someone else's definition, then I have to look at where I'm not okay with that, right? Like if I'm not living up to someone else's definition of what a good mother is, like I have to unwind any part of me that thinks that I should be somehow trying to live under someone else's rule or by someone else's standards of what a good mother is. And so that really was in that phase 2, it was reclaiming the mind and beginning to create sovereignty, financial sovereignty, emotional sovereignty, mental sovereignty. And from here, it really did, like, I would say we're in phase 3 now, which I said in the beginning, I am sure there's places where I'm not 100% sovereign, but I would say I'm pretty dang close, like just full spectrum sovereignty. And I no longer define myself by anyone else's rules for who I'm supposed to be as a mom. I am very clear with decisions I make for, like, okay, what does being a good parent look like to me? What does being a good business owner look like to me? What does being a good investor, a good wife, like all of those things? And really just making sure that I'm living in alignment with what my highest full expression of that is for myself, where I'm taking care of me, oxygen mask on first and foremost, right? And so, like, what this has really looked like here is, like, in this phase, I just have so much financial sovereignty, right? Like, with the amount of wealth that we have, because in phase 2, I took responsibility that I am the one who's, like, no matter what's in my bank account or my investment for, like, I'm the one who's responsible for that number. And, like, obviously I'm in partnership with my husband on that. And we're looking at those things, but there's just so many things. Like, my husband is a wonderful man. Like, he's a great provider, like, loves his job, loves his career, but especially on the investment side, I just tend to be more interested in that. So every real estate deal, I source those relationships. I find the deals. I set the meetings, right? And then we work together on building that. So it's not like I'm alone in that. But I really looked like, as a woman, like, I feel like women have this thing around, like, I'm bad with money, or women don't know, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just don't entertain any of that. I'm just like, I like to have wealth. And so what is my part in creating that? And there's so many things that I love in, like, it's so fun to have your money go out and make so much more money and come back with more money. And, to be able to do the things, like, at this point we're flying in, like 2 days, take our kids first class to Japan and take a couple weeks off and all of those things. And creating that financial sovereignty has really allowed for that in my life. Then doing all the work I talked about in phase 2 of, like, asking for what I needed from my husband, in looking at when I feel guilty about having hired a house manager and then I feel guilty for having her work like cray, right? So I had to really look at creating that emotional sovereignty for myself. And I'm now able to be present, right? So, like, when I'm working, I'm able to just work and love my work when it's through, like, during the school year, at least when it's 3:00 and I take off and I go get my sons and I hold their hands on the way home from the bus stop, I can be present with them. Another addition I can say, like, this past year, I think a little bit ago I talked about, like, is when I look at who I want to be, is there something that's off? And I think a great example of that was, I think I started ending my workday at 3, like, maybe 2 years ago. But then I realized that I wasn't being as conscious with my time as I wanted to be as a mom. And so this past year, we did an entire school year, but every single Monday was Fantastic Mommy Adventure Day. And I did this whole thing where I worked with ChatGPT to create, like, a list of menu items, like almost like you're going to a restaurant to order. So I looked up places we could go to get sweet treats, fun activities we could do at the park, crafts, like, just like this menu for my kids to feel really empowered every Monday. And then I even, like, laminated and stuff, and it sits, like, on our refrigerator. And so on Mondays when they get home, they all look at the things. Sometimes I have it planned in advance and then I just pull it out. And then sometimes I take out the menu and I'm like, what do you guys want to do for Fantastic Mommy Adventure Day? And so that has become such a sacred time. And then this summer, I did a full Fantastic Mommy Adventure Week, and I took them to a water park. I'm trying to think of what else we did. We did, like, super fun stuff every day. The water park was for sure the most fun, though. And, like, just really spent all week with them at home, connecting, spending time, all of those things, right? And then it was just looking at any story I had in my mind of why I couldn't do that, or why I had to be, like, working in my business. Or at this point, I didn't really have that. But for sure, I think if I had tried to implement something like that a few years ago, there would have been excuses for why, right? And so I just wanted to lay this out. This is something, I think as well, I'm going to be, I'll see if I can match up when I put this episode out to, basically, I'm on a private podcast series, and I think it's called, like, The Secret Lives of CEO Moms or something. But I recently gave an interview, basically, and went through some different angles or questions in this. Like I actually talked a bit more about like some tricky stuff I had in my marriage. So like if there's anything for you, if you are a mother and you've had like different dynamic stuff with your partner, like I would highly recommend going to listen to that. And if it's out, I'll make sure that we link it into this podcast. But yeah, I cannot recommend becoming a sovereign woman enough, right? Like having our home like runs like a symphony. Everyone knows their role. I get to be creative and happy and in my pleasure and taking bubble baths when I want to, but also like taking off and going on adventures with my kids when I want to. I'm not the doer of all the things. I get to be the orchestrator of the magic, which is really where I sort of sit in my seat of like highest magic, I would say. Like another fun example is we're going to Japan with some neighbors that we're best friends with that you probably hear me talk about all the time, but like to the point we like went to traveled together last Thanksgiving and we're together and we're taking a 2-week trip to Japan together, our two families. And so as we were preparing for that, like the role that I took on there, like, and nobody asked me to, I just did it. But it was like, okay, we're going to make Japan nights. So like every week for the first half of the summer, we would get together, our two families, and we would have some sort of Japanese meal. We would have a Japanese dessert. We would watch a Japanese movie, right? Like Spirited Away, anything Studio Ghibli, basically, right? And I have created for our trip to Japan, I've created like, not a worksheet, but like some contemplative questions that we can like ask our kids every day to like really help them, like, you know, what's something interesting you smelled today? What's a memory you're going to remember? Like just those little things that help really, I think like my experience as a coach and just creating a fantastic life is like allowing me to bring that as a gift, right? Not just to my own family, but then to our two families while we're on this trip. And it really all started from just me taking responsibility for going through these 3 phases and creating something that I basically get to own fully. So this was it. If you have any questions or if you've heard anything in this where you're like, ooh, I would love like a deeper dive into this topic, I'm happy to bring it forward. You guys can come over. My son's just walked outside. It's like a perfect time to bring this. Oh, he's not. He's walking away. Hey, do you want to come here and tell them I'm talking about being a mom? Do you want to come talk about what Fantastic Mommy Adventure Week was like? Do you want to tell them like what it's like?
It's really fun. We do activities and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, Mommy gets stuff to buy and then we do stuff with them.
Oh, but we can talk about Fantastic Mommy Adventure Days.
Yeah, so you like buy stuff maybe, and then we play with it when we get home from school.
Yeah.
Or we just have something that we already have. And we did Typhoon, Texas.
Okay, well, yeah, so, well, you can come tell them.
And also, once we made potions.
Yes, was that your favorite?
Yeah.
Okay, so if the mommies listening want to do something special for their kids like Fantastic Mommy Adventure Days, what as a kid would you recommend they do for their kiddos?
I don't know.
Okay.
You have so much fun stuff.
All right, you've heard it from my kids first. Making time to be a good mom and an amazing business owner is totally possible. So go out and make some magic for your family.